Yeah, thank you, Sheila, for starting that recording. I'm going to share my screen and we'll go over the agenda. Just a second here. Okay, can you see my slide there with the thumbs up? Awesome. All right. So this morning we get to hear from Kasha Rosetta, who is an attorney with OSPI. She's going to be going over a presentation called Navigating Section 504. This is normally like an hour and a half long presentation, but she's shortening it up for us and hopefully we'll be able to gear the information, especially for us as school nurses. So as you are thinking of questions, by all means, please put them in the chat or raise your hand so that we can make sure that the information that you need is answered. And so after Kasha presents to us, then we'll hear from Dr. Wallace with our public health update and from Kathy with our school nurse updates. As always, our meeting objective is to get information regarding resources, practices, or opportunities that we can use to safeguard our students' health and improve their learning outcomes. So our goal, my goal for putting these on for you is to be able to help you identify at least two resources or opportunities that are available to you in supporting your students. Just a reminder that this meeting is recorded, so please keep your microphones muted. If you have a question or comment, put it in the chat. Sheila and I are always monitoring that. Kathy's on it as well, monitoring that as well. So we'll make sure that your comments get presented. And then also if you want clock hours for these meetings, for these updates, it's in PD Enroller. So we either need to watch it live or you can watch a recording and fill out the survey. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to email me so I can help you. I'm happy to help with that process. So Kasha did email me this morning and let me know that she was going to be running a little bit late. So I put together a polling question for you regarding 504s and your current standing regarding 504s. So Sheila, if you wouldn't mind launching that polling question for us, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Wait, oh no, that's naloxone. But you can answer this one too if you'd like. Have you noticed any opioid usage among the student body? Oh, this is when we had Grant or Garth from the health district on with us. Has anyone seen any activity with amongst the student body? None? Well, that's good. Okay. Well, instead of launching that poll, how about I have you put in the chat? My question was for you is how often are you involved in the 504 process? Very like highly involved? Are you being asked to write accommodations and are you having to kind of push it through with doing the referral and filling out all the paperwork and calling the team meetings? Or are you rarely involved, never involved? So if you have a chance, put it in the chat so we can kind of get an understanding or an idea of what's going on in your district regarding that. In the loop half the time, highly involved 10% of the time, very rarely, maybe only 3 times in 3 years. Oh, okay. Never, 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 somewhat involved, rarely, rarely. Okay, I do the medical 504s for the district and create them. Yep, I understand that one. Rarely involved in the 504 process. We do IHPs and ECPs, but Most of the time we need to ask for 504 access. Does everyone have access to their 504s, or do you have to um, uh, kind of beg for those? Okay. I'm only involved in contributing health information. Okay. There's a lot of information here. Oh my goodness. Well, I appreciate you sharing all this, and um, it gives a lot of food for thought with regard to how you're involved currently, and um, maybe we need to start talking about how we can support you in getting into those 504 meetings and being a part of the team. But Kasha is on our meeting. So greetings, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. Just a brief introduction to Kasha. Am I saying your name right?
Yes, you are. Thank
Okay,
you.
wonderful. So Kasha is a civil rights and school law attorney who has represented both parents and student or school districts in private practice and interned at the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. Before attending law school at Seattle University, Kasha was a middle school English teacher at a small independent school in Seattle. She is a proud alum of Northwest University in Evansville, Illinois, where she was a four-time letter winner in Division I's women's soccer. Her hobbies include trail running, reading historical fiction, and exploring new parks with her wife and toddler. So welcome, Kasha. We really appreciate you being with us.
Thanks so much. And thanks for the few minutes of grace. Those of you who are parents, I'm sure understand kind of last minute schedule changes. So I just like flew over to drop my child off at preschool and flew back. Um, so, okay. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen, and it might take just a minute for me to get the tech done. We'll do slideshow from beginning. All right. Are you seeing my beautiful slide? Okay, it's really not that beautiful. So yes, so today we are going to talk about Section 504, and I understand that I have just about an hour, which our normal trainings on 504 are 4 hours. So we are going to do the quick and dirty version. But what I would like to do, I saw that you were talking a little bit before I got here about your involvement in the process. And so what I'd like to do is start just, bare bones, what is 504, and then go into the process. But I gave you a lot more slides than we're ever going to have time to go through today. I wanted you to have those as a resource. So if you saw the slide deck and you were like, holy mackerel, is this woman an auctioneer? Like, how are we going to get through all this stuff? We're not. I just wanted you to have that as a resource to lean upon for the stuff that we don't get to. So as we go, I would love your questions if they are related to what we've just covered. We're also going to have some time at the end where you can ask questions. Linnea, I don't know if you are up for manning the chat, if somebody wants to chat their question and you can just interrupt me. I just find that that is most helpful because then we're all on the same page. Thank you so much.
I am on it.
Awesome. So just a bit about our office in case you don't know about us. So we are a small office within OSPI, Equity and Civil Rights Office. All of our work focuses on helping ensure that students are able to access their education without discrimination. So we try to take more of a proactive and preventative stance, but obviously there are going to be times where complaints are filed or we need to monitor for compliance. So this is just an overview of what our office does. We are a neutral resource. So we are here for you. We are here for families, for students. We have community members who call and ask us questions about civil rights laws, both state and federal, how they apply. We've had kind of an uptick in calls lately, as you can imagine, with some of the shifts at the federal level in civil rights land. So we're here for you. Do not be afraid to pick up the phone or shoot us an email. We'll have contact information at the end. So today's topics, as I mentioned, we are not going to get through everything. I'm hoping we're going to get through most of this, but I do really want to focus on the areas that are most useful to you. So I'm going to stop in just a minute and ask which part of the process is of most interest to people, and we can do some background and then focus on that. Okay. So just to make sure that we're starting from the same place, We're going to do just a quick overview of what 504 is. What does it require districts to do? What's the difference between 504 and special ed? What's a 504 coordinator? Who's covered and who's entitled to FAPE under 504. So 504 is part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It's a federal civil rights statute. It applies to all schools that accept federal funding. We also have a state law that protects against disability discrimination. So that applies to all schools that accept state funding. And as I'm sure you know, and no additional funding comes to your districts under 504, but you have agreed to abide by it by virtue of accepting those federal funds. So it's as a condition of accepting federal and state money, you have committed yourself to not discriminating against students with disabilities. So this is what the law says. This is very classic civil rights statute text. It just says that nobody by virtue of protected class, in this case, disability, can be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination in any school program or activity. So essentially what this boils down to is that under 504, students with disabilities are entitled to equal access to all of the district's programs and activities. Okay, equal access. It doesn't mean that they get to be on the basketball team or they get to be in AP classes, but they get equal access to that. They get the supports they need to be able to have equal opportunity to access those offerings. We'll talk a bit more about it. 504 is notorious for being a very squishy and gray law. There are not a lot of things that are outlined in black and white in 504. And that's usually where all the discussion happens, right? But I first want to focus us on where we do have concrete answers. So under 504, these are the things that are unequivocally required. You have to designate someone in your district to serve as the 504 coordinator. We'll talk about what that person does in just a couple slides. You have to adopt complaint procedures that allow families to challenge decisions or challenge the process that was used to arrive at decisions. We've done that for you. So under state law, all of your districts have a discrimination complaint procedure that aligns with 504. So you don't have to worry about it. It's already in place in your districts. You have to provide parents with notice of their rights and their procedural safeguards at certain points along the way. And you have to get parent consent at two key places before the initial evaluation of a student and before you implement their plan for the first time. You have to follow the process, which is what we're going to spend most of our time on today. Team decisions. Nobody should be making a 504 decision on their own. We'll talk about what that looks like. And we have to also reevaluate each student periodically. Periodically is at least once every 3 years. Okay, and that's kind of, we've borrowed that timeline from the special education laws. So these are the things that are absolutely required. There's other stuff that, best practices, stuff that's been established through case law, and through guidance, and we'll talk about that as we discuss the process. Any questions about the set of requirements though? Okay, I'm looking to you, Linnea, because I can't see everybody. I only see 4 of you right now. So, okay. It helps sometimes to kind of flesh out some of the differences between 504 and the Special Education Law, the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, okay, just to kind of compare and contrast, because there's a lot of overlap, but there are some key differences that we need to be aware of if we're involved in the 504 process. So the first thing is that 504 is a civil rights law, whereas the IDEA is a federal law and it's a grant program. Important distinction there is that the IDEA comes with funding, 504 does not. Okay, you're probably acutely aware of that. Another key difference, under 504, there are no qualifying disability categories that a student has to fall into. Instead, there is a broader definition of disability under 504 that we will talk through. That's all a student has to demonstrate. Whereas under the IDEA, there are 13 qualifying categories. So things like other health impairment, autism, specific learning disability. And a student has to fall into one of those categories in order to be eligible. In addition, we have to think about the impact of the disability on the student. Under 504, there is no requirement that the disability only impact learning. All it has to do is substantially limit a major life activity. We'll talk about that and how that applies to you as nurses because it's very broad. Special education, conversely, the disability has to create an adverse educational impact and the student has to demonstrate a need for specially designed instruction. Okay, so that is a very key difference there. Section 504 is much broader coverage. Interestingly, parent participation is not required under 504. It's an absolute best practice, however, if we can. Okay, so that is not technically required. It is required under special ed. They have to be part of the IEP team. And then finally, how do we provide students with a free, appropriate public education? Typically, schools will develop what's called a 504 plan for students, where they outline all the accommodations the student is going to receive during the school day. And the other document in special education is called an individualized education program, and that outlines the specially designed instruction in addition to the related aids and services. So it's nice just to kind of distinguish between these laws because they are often confused for one another. I also want to point out a very important individual in each of your districts, and that is the person who's been designated to serve as what we call the 504 coordinator. What does that mean? What's their job? So it is a rather weighty responsibility. So if you know your 504 coordinator, maybe shoot them a little thank you today for taking all this on behalf of your district, right? So they're responsible for coordinating and monitoring your district's compliance with Section 504 and state disability discrimination laws. They are the primary point of contact for all complaints, concerns, comments, questions, compliments about 504. They resolve complaints and concerns. They make sure they're trained up so they know how to do this work, and they ensure that their employees are trained. If you're unsure as to who serves in this important role in your district, we have a directory, a searchable directory that you can click on. This is a live link, and you can type in your district's name and find out who your district has designated to serve in this role. And it might be you. And if that's the case, thank you. So that's what the 504 coordinator does. Another important threshold question is, who does 504 cover, right? So what types of students are covered? Broadly speaking, there are 3 types of students. The first is the type that you are going to encounter most frequently in your roles as nurses. And those are students who fit the definition of having a disability under 504, which is they have a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Don't worry, we're gonna walk through those elements separately, but that's one type of student. The next type is somebody who has a record of this type of impairment. So maybe it's a student who previously had a severe illness, but that impairment is no longer active or no longer current. But because they had a record of that impairment, they're still protected from discrimination based on disability. The third type is somebody that other people perceive as having an impairment even when they don't have one. This is very unusual. This one we tend to get stuck on when I do these trainings. People are like, what does that mean? I don't even understand. It's a little confusing. I'll give you the example OCR gives, but then I would just like to encourage us, unless we really have a question about it, to just kind of accept it and move on because we could kind of get stuck talking about it all day. So regarded as having an impairment. So an example that OCR, which is the Office for Civil Rights in the US Department of Ed, has given is that somebody making an assumption that because a student has a family member with like tuberculosis or HIV, assuming the student also has one of those conditions because they have a family member and treating that student differently as a result. Okay, so you can see this doesn't happen very often, but that is the example that they've given. Who gets a free appropriate public education? Who gets a 504 plan? Only the green types of students. Okay, which makes sense when you think about it, because only the green students at the top of that list actually have an impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. The other 2 types don't. However, and this is more important for your 504 coordinator to know, those blue students or grayish students are still protected from disability-related discrimination. They just don't get a 504 plan. Okay. Do we have questions about this? Who qualifies for FAPE and who doesn't? How's the chat looking, Linnea?
There
Silent?
aren't any questions yet. I think we're
Okay.
just absorbing it still. So
Yeah, yeah. And am I moving too quickly? Good? Okay. Just if I am, let Linnea know and she can interrupt me. Okay. So 504 in a nutshell. We like to show this cartoon. So this is, in case it's too small for you to see, it's a dinosaur classroom, which I'm sure you all have seen. Stegosaurus is the teacher, and they are saying, oh, looks like it'll be another F in class participation, Rex. And the reason for that is because, as we all know, T-Rex has very tiny arms, and he cannot raise his hand high enough for the teacher to see that he's actually really trying to participate. Okay, so this is a student that, may or may not have a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. What 504 is designed to do is to provide this, right? To level the playing field and provide that dinosaur or student with the accommodations they need to equally access and benefit from that class activity or from sports or from debate club or whatever the school offering is. So this is what we're trying to provide in 504 is that stopgap that helps students kind of rise to where their peers are who don't have that same disability. Okay, so those are just the images we like. I'm a visual learner, so those resonate and stick with me. Okay, that is the end of our background material, and I would love to dive into the process unless there are questions about any of that threshold material. Okay, awesome. So this is our beautiful Section 504 process. Okay, these are the steps that a district has to take when a student has been referred for a 504 evaluation. And our office really focuses on the process because the process was designed to help ensure that parents are provided with notice about their students' rights at the right time, that they are part of the decision making. When we receive a Section 504 complaint, we will start by looking at whether or not the LEA followed or the district followed the process. It's the first hurdle. Very rarely will we get into whether or not an accommodation is appropriate or whether or not a student's plan is appropriate because that's your area of expertise. We're not nurses. Most of us in our office are not teachers. And so we may not be the experts on what accommodation a student might need, but we do know what the process requires. And in order to have a valid 504 plan, we have to follow the process. Not following the process can open the district up to a complaint of disability discrimination. So that's how we kind of get pulled in, okay, is that disability discrimination can include a district failing to follow the process. So a district not referring a student for an evaluation or delaying an evaluation or not evaluating a student, not providing a plan, not reevaluating within the right time frame. Okay, so those are the type of process-based violations that we look for. Okay, so the first step is referral. And a referral is really just a request for the LEA. So LEA is Local Education Agency. I use that because we have tribal compact schools and charter schools that are not necessarily districts, but they're wrapped into the LEA definition. So I may use that interchangeably. It's a request for the LEA to evaluate a student for Section 504 eligibility. Okay. When do we have to do this? The standard is super broad, right? You may have heard of a child find obligation, which applies to special ed and to 504. And it's this broader obligation that the school has, that any school employee has, when they know or suspect that a student might have a disability and may need accommodations or support, they have an obligation to refer a student for an evaluation. Okay, what does it mean to know that a student has a disability? I would imagine that as nurses, parents are often going to tell you when their student has a health condition, right? Epilepsy, diabetes, a food allergy, right? They're not going to sit on that information and just wait for something to happen. They're going to be proactive and say, hey, my kid's got X, Y, and Z. We need to set up a plan to make sure they're safe and get what they need at school. That's an example when we would know that a student might have a disability. A teacher might know because a parent might say, hey, my child has ADHD, my child's autistic, right? So that's when we might know, is when we're directly provided with that information. Or on the enrollment form, people have to check a box or fill out, write in a condition their student might have. This suspect the student might have a disability, that's a little bit squishier, a little bit tougher. There's not a nice, neat checklist we can go down. But a key red flag is when a student is missing school or class time a lot, right? Those absences could be related to a disability. So maybe that student is refusing to go to school. Maybe they're spending time in your office or in the bathroom. Maybe they are in the principal's office because they're being disciplined more frequently. Missing seat time, academic struggles, asking for extra accommodations, all of these are indications that we may need to suspect that something is going on and the student might need an evaluation. Everyone in your district has this obligation, right? So not only teachers, not only you as nurses, counselors, bus drivers, coaches, right? The obligation goes across all of the district's employees. These slides where we have italics are common questions that we get. So one question we often get is, well, the parent didn't say anything. How are we supposed to know? And yes, absolutely, the parent, if they can tell you. But under the law, it's not the parent that has the obligation. It's the district that has the obligation to refer the student. A parent could be the first person to notice that something's going on, but the important message here is we just don't want to wait for the parent to say something. They may not know that 504 is a thing. They may not know about special education. So we want to take that upon ourselves. And as nurses, it's probably a little bit more concrete just because parents are generally more aware of, health conditions that their students have for the most part, right? So it's a little bit, they're probably going to be a little bit more forthcoming about that, but not always. The other common myth that we want to dispel is that we need some type of diagnosis before we can refer. That simply isn't true. We don't need a diagnosis or a doctor's note in order to refer a student for an evaluation. Now, we'll talk about if you need that information during the evaluation, it's okay to ask for it, but we don't want to delay the referral because we're waiting on a doctor's note. The know or suspect standard is broad enough that if we just think something odd is going on with this kid, that they might need supports, let's just refer and get that evaluation going, okay? Key takeaways here. Anyone can refer a student for a 504 evaluation. The burden shouldn't fall only on the parent. So all employees of a school district have that affirmative obligation to refer, and no specific documentation is required to start that process. So one thing that I did, so I have a 4-year-old that I'm in the process of registering for kindergarten, right? So go onto your district's website and see if you can find the information about how to make a referral. That information should be really easy to find, right? My district has a number you can call, which I will argue is not always the best thing. There's no email address. And when I call that number, it doesn't always get picked up. So we want to have multiple ways of contacting, right? The folks that are accepting those referrals. And we want to make that information as easy for parents and for families to find as possible. So that's just a little test, a little project you can do, in all of your spare time. And if it's not an easy process, maybe there's some changes that we can take to make that a more accessible process for folks thinking about translating information or those types of steps too. Questions about referral?
There are no questions in the chat yet, Kasha.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. Okay, the next step in the process then is we're referring for the evaluation, right? We're going to evaluate to figure out if the student is eligible under 504. Now, I do want to draw your attention to right here, there is a parent notification and consent requirement. So before we can conduct an initial evaluation, the 504 team does need to get parents' consent. We can't just evaluate a student without the parents being aware of it. You have to also provide parents with notice of their rights and procedural safeguards. Consent does not have to be in writing, although that's a best practice. Like if you're talking to a parent on the phone, you can say, hey, we'd like to evaluate your student. do I have your consent? And if they say yes, you can just put in your notes, parent gave verbal consent on X date. Most districts will have forms that have like a checkbox or a place for parents to sign. And I don't know if that's the case for all of you, but consent documented in the student's file is required at this step. So again, an evaluation is just the process through which the team is going to collect and analyze the data that's specific to that student to determine a student's eligibility. Okay, there are certain requirements that we have and steps we have to go through before the evaluation, during the evaluation, and after the evaluation. So before the evaluation, like we just talked about, providing parents with notice and consent, we have to get the 504 team together. And I saw that in the chat before I joined that many of you may not be a part of teams on a regular basis. And if the student has some type of medical or health condition, I think that you would be really important partners and really important team members. So that might be something to revisit with your districts if you're only getting pulled in at like the last minute. Like you and your expertise need to be there as as the team is talking through whether or not the student qualifies, and if so, what the impact of the thing, the impairment is on the student at school and how you can help support them. So we have to get the team together. And then we have to also document all the decisions that we're making. So the first step, just notifying parents and obtaining consent. We talked about this. This is just kind of a reminder slide that outlines it for you in bullet points. In terms of the Section 504 team, so 504 is very clear that no one person is supposed to gatekeep or be the sole decision maker. The decisions need to be made by a team of people, and a team just means more than one. Okay, who should be on a team? Well, unlike special education, there aren't requirements about the exact person. It doesn't say the counselor must be part of the team, the nurse must be part of the team. Instead, under 504, what we have is a need for people with 3 different types of knowledge. Somebody who is personally knowledgeable about the student. Often that's a parent, but it can also be a current or former teacher, a nurse, a counselor, someone who knows that kid. And just reviewing a student's file is not really considered to be knowing that kid. We need to have somebody that knows the child on a deeper level. The second type of knowledge that the team has to have is somebody who can analyze and interpret the meaning of the data that we're collecting. This is going to be really different depending on the type of impairment, right? If you have a kid who you suspect is grappling with anxiety, for example, that's going to be a really different type of knowledge than a kid that's missing a limb, missing an arm, right? You're going to have people that need to have different understandings of what the impact could be of those very different impairments, right? So it could be a doctor, a teacher, a nurse, a counselor, a SPED director, a 504 coordinator, right? It's really kid specific. The third type of knowledge we have to have is somebody who knows about the placement options at the school. And placement options just means what accommodations we can provide. Okay, so again, one person can have knowledge in 2 of these fields. We don't have to have 3 people just who are limited in these 3 fields. We can have people that kind of go back and forth, but the team has to consist of people that collectively have this type of knowledge about the student. One example that we like to highlight, just 504 is all about individualized accommodations, right, and individualized analysis. And so depending on the student's identified or suspected impairments, right, we're going to have really different configurations of teams. So there was one school district, and I can't remember where it was, but there was a student with like a really bad dust allergy. And so this team decided to pull somebody from their facilities department to figure out where in the classroom the kid could sit that he would have access to like the best filtered air from the HVAC system, right? So that was kind of a creative outside the box, like who could we pull in that would know this information? Oh, this facilities person, right? So thinking creatively about who has the knowledge that you need to help ensure the student is accommodated can be a creative exercise. Let's talk a bit about this whole idea of a 504 meeting, because I think that people of my generation tend to think that meetings mean that we all get together in one room and like maybe there's cookies and tea and like we talk about things in person, face to face. And that can absolutely be a meeting. That is outstanding, right? We can hold a 504 meeting all in person. But we can also, in this day and age, right, we can collect information from different people in asynchronous time. We can use Zoom, we can use the phone. So we don't have to all be sitting around the table at the same time, but there does need to be somebody who's coordinating the collection of all the information and data. Okay, so just think about what a 504 meeting, it's so hard to coordinate people's schedules. So think about if there's a different way that you can make sure that everyone's participating, even if they're not talking face to face. And then the final thing before the evaluation is just to make sure we're documenting the steps that we're taking and putting that in the student's file. Okay, so during the evaluation, we have 3 really important tasks. The first is to collect and consider information from a variety of sources. So not leaning only on one piece of information to make the determination, but a variety of sources. We're completing the eval within a reasonable time, and we're making an informed decision about the student's eligibility. So let's break these down just a little bit more. Variety of sources. So really it can be anything, right? Anything that the team feels that would be helpful as it's making its decision about whether a student has a disability and whether or not they need accommodations, whether or not they need a plan, right? So it could be aptitude and achievement tests. It could be academic records. It could be input and observations from people throughout the student's school day. It could be medical records. Could be conversations with teachers or counselors or nurses. Really, it's kind of limitless. Okay. So anything that the team believes it needs to make an informed decision is fair game. Let's return to this question of a medical diagnosis because we do often get contacted by families who say, my student got referred for an evaluation. We don't have a medical diagnosis and they're requiring us to get one before they'll evaluate. This is not okay under 504. Okay, this is a barrier. There's nothing in 504 that requires a medical diagnosis in order to evaluate a student. Okay, it can be absolutely a helpful tool, and often parents will provide it because they want you to have all the information that they have because they want their kid to be served properly, right, in class, but we can't require it. Now, if the 504 team believes that truly they cannot determine a student's eligibility without some type of diagnosis, they can offer to pay for one, right, on the school's dime, or they can say, parents always have an option to obtain a private one too if they want to, but you can't force a parent to pay for a private eval. And if you think about it, this does kind of make sense from an evaluation perspective. First of all, we're providing a free, appropriate public education, right? Free is the key word there. But think about this from a practical standpoint. So let's say that we have a diagnosis and we know the student's autistic. Okay, does this diagnosis help us determine if that student is eligible? Really hard to say. Why is that? Because autism impacts every student, every person really differently. There are some commonalities, like you could maybe, we never want to assume, but like in the back of your head, you could be like, okay, this student might have maybe some sensory, some communication, maybe some socialization impairments, but we don't know how autism is impacting this kid, right? So that's what the evaluation is for. Diagnosis is helpful. It's helpful to know, so we know, but we need to dig in a little bit more and figure out how that impacts the student at school, which is really the point of the eval. Reasonable time to complete the eval. 504, of course, does not define what it means by reasonable time, and there isn't a whole lot of guidance about it, but the general rule that we recommend, which is taken from guidance from the feds, is that really in no case should a 504 evaluation take longer than a SPED evaluation. So in Washington, that's a 60-day timeline. And the reason for that is because we're not usually doing a lot of new testing under 504. right? For SPED, if someone's trying to qualify, like we may be doing a lot of different tests to figure out what, whether or not they're impacted and they need specially designed instruction. Here, there's a lot of reliance on existing data. So we don't need quite as long. So under 504, we generally recommend that the evaluation take no longer than 60 days from start to finish, and often it will not take even a fraction of that time. Okay. This is a question we get. Well, can we try some accommodations first before we evaluate the student? And the answer is you're welcome to try accommodations, but don't delay the start of the evaluation in order to see what happens. You can do them concurrently, right? You can be providing accommodations, and that can be really useful information as we're evaluating a student, but we don't want to wait to start the eval until we have like the results of this. I had just talked to a parent the other day who was trying to get her accommodations tweaked in her son's 504 plan, and the district was like, well, let's just try this for 2 weeks and then we'll talk about. And she was like, no, that's 2 weeks that we're not having an informed discussion, right? We want to put them in the plan and then we'll tweak the plan as necessary, but we don't want to wait and see. It takes too much time out of a student's academic year. All right, and then finally, this is the crux, and this is the part where you're going to be pulled into teams, I would imagine here, and then in the accommodation piece. When you're making an informed eligibility decision, the team is seeking to answer 2 questions. The first question is, does the student have a disability under 504 as it's defined? We'll talk about what that definition is in just a sec. And then the next question is, if the answer to the first question is yes, do they need the school to provide them with anything during their school day to help them equally access and benefit from their education? Okay, so you'll notice that the if so presumes a yes answer to this first question. If the answer to this first question is no, the student is not eligible for a 504 plan. Okay, so if they don't have a disability, not eligible, and you would provide written notice to the parent about that team decision, and the parents have an opportunity to challenge that decision. There's a whole process for that, but you're not on the hook then to write a plan because you've decided that student doesn't have a disability. Okay. So let's talk about this first question and really hone in on what the definition of disability is. So under Section 504, a disability is defined as a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Let's talk about these 3 elements one at a time. The first one, mental or physical impairment. Congress's intent in drafting it this broadly was to capture as many students as possible. This is a yes or no question. You are not assessing anything related to the impairment, that comes later. You're just saying, does the student have a mental or physical impairment? Examples of what this could look like. Maybe the student has a hearing impairment. Maybe they have difficulty focusing. Maybe they are showing signs of depression. Maybe you know they have epilepsy or brittle bone disease or something, right? A peanut allergy, right? It can really be most anything. And importantly here, it doesn't say diagnosis, right? It's just an impairment, a mental or physical impairment. So really broad, don't spend too much time deliberating this. If you think they do, then answer yes for purposes of this part of the evaluation. We're going to go a little bit out of order and next focus on what a major life activity is. We'll talk about substantially limits in just a second. So does the student have a mental or physical impairment that limits a major life activity? And again, this is kind of a yes or no question. Here is a list of the original life activities that was included in the statute. Again, not an exhaustive list, just to kind of give people an example of what their Congress meant. So breathing, speaking, hearing, walking, reading, concentrating. Okay. In 2008, Congress amended the Americans with Disabilities Act and created a brand new category of things that count as major life activities, major bodily functions. And as you can see, just from reviewing this non-exhaustive list, it includes pretty much anything related to a person's health or well-being. And this is how students with health conditions all of a sudden got pulled into the Section 504 process. Okay, so since 2009, when this took effect, students with health conditions, Congress has directed schools to make sure we are evaluating and placing these students consistent with 504 procedures. So we're going through the 504 process with regard to students with health conditions. And this is often a point where I get questions because people start to panic a little bit and think, oh my gosh, I can see my workload exponentially multiplying. Yes, this is potentially true. If your LEA is not evaluating students and using 504 procedures, so what I mean by that is referring them for an evaluation, team decisions, parental notice, that is something that we need to get your district on board with. And if that is happening in your district, let's talk offline and we can talk about some strategies for bringing folks on board. This is a very common issue. And so we do have the ability to help troubleshoot with you and message this to people that need to know in your district. So please feel free to reach out to me if you're worried about whether or not this is happening in your district. Okay. So the impact of this amendment was really just that we really expanded the number of students who now need to be considered under 504. Okay. Let's talk about substantially limits. Right? So we've said, okay, let's say the student, yes, we've answered yes, they do have a mental or physical impairment. We do believe it's impacting a major life activity. Now the question is how much? And of course, 504 does not tell us what substantially means. So it's kind of left to your professional judgment. But basically the question is, when compared to a peer that doesn't have a similar impairment, how limited is the student? Are they minorly limited? Are they not at all limited? Significantly, is it a life-threatening situation? So think of it kind of on a spectrum. And if it tips the scale into that substantial area, that's up to the team to figure out. Okay. Any questions, Linnea?
There's nothing in the chat, but this might be an excellent spot to ask the question that was submitted earlier regarding, oh, actually, hold on. We haven't
Yeah.
gotten to accommodations, so I will save that
What is the
question
question
for.
so I can kind of front load it in my own head?
It is the question regarding students that have like asthma and participating in PE, and the team decides to not implement a 504 and told the nurse to just go ahead and put accommodations in the individualized health plan as opposed to creating a 504. So,
Yes,
yeah,
IHPs and 504. I actually have a scenario about that, which we can interject right before the accommodation sections.
okay, okay.
Okay. I think that's a
Um,
great, yeah, because we do get that question a lot. What's an IHP? What's an individualized health plan? How does it measure up under 504? So we can talk about that.
okay.
Is there anything else?
Oh, I was just going to ask, based on the major life activities, I know a lot of times nurses get asked to assist with what people would term a medical 504 versus a different 504. And it sounds to me like all 504s are technically medical 504s because mental health is health, and a lot of times the school nurse is asked to help out or to at least participate in supporting students with mental health issues. So, but I guess I'm just wondering what would be an example of a 504 that the dirt nurse isn't needed on.
Great question. And I think that's again going to be an individualized team decision. But we have heard that districts make these distinctions between a medical 504 and like an academic 504. And I think you're right to say that there really isn't that distinction. They're all 504s. It's all based on whether or not a student has a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits that major life activity. Now, some kids, let's take a student with diabetes, for example, right? Let's take a kindergartner with diabetes who still needs help testing their blood sugar, administering their insulin, all of that. The team, if that team comes together and realizes that student doesn't need any help in the classroom, they just need help managing their illness, their health condition, then I suppose you could think of that as a medical 504, but it's still because it's going to be focused on providing that student with nursing care, essentially, right? But it still needs to be put, they still need to come to that decision using 504 process. And so I guess you could make that distinction between medical and academic, but really we want to kind of think about 504 as holistically surrounding that student throughout that school day. So whether or not it's in class, in passing periods, PE, chemistry class, choir, right, after school activities, field trips, right? So it's a wraparound thing. And so what a student might need at different times and in different activities may kind of cross over that academic medical distinction, right? So we want to just make sure that the plan has the people on the team who know about the impact of the student's condition and what accommodations they might need. I hadn't thought about it in terms of all 504s could be technically considered medical. I've never heard it framed that way, but that's an intriguing concept to me. So I want to think about that a little bit more before I respond to that, because I don't want nurses thinking they have to be part of all 504 teams, because that's simply not true. Okay. Don't worry. You're not going to be pulled into all of these. Okay. But we'll revisit the individualized health plan question in just a minute, because that is a big one that applies directly to your work and your practice. So a question we get often is, do certain impairments automatically qualify a student as someone with a disability? And OCR says no, because an impairment in and of itself is not necessarily a disability. To be considered that disability, it has to substantially limit a major life activity. So we say, just because a student has X, Y, or Z doesn't mean they automatically qualify for a 504 plan. They may not need anything. You might have a senior in high school who has diabetes, doesn't need any help managing their care, is fine academically, right? And all they would need is like that life-threatening or the emergency health plan that you write for them, right? They might not need, and that's a decision the 504 team can come to. Okay, just a reminder that major life activities aren't limited to learning, okay? And a couple things that are kind of confusing, but if you're going to be on a team, you do need to know this. When we are trying to figure out if a student has a quote unquote disability, we want to consider whether or not that student is substantially limited when the condition is active. So somebody having a full-on allergy attack when exposed to peanuts, a migraine, active migraine, when cancer is out of remission, in the middle of gosh, I don't know, an autistic meltdown, right? So when the condition is active, how limited would that student be? And if the answer is substantially, then we're probably going to say that they have a disability under 504. The other thing that's a bit confusing is at this stage of the eval, we want to ignore the benefits of any mitigating measures the student is taking. So supports like medication, assistive devices, medical equipment and supplies, wheelchairs, prosthetics, hearing aids, mobility, we want to remove those from our decision and our determination of whether or not the student has a disability at this point in time. The only thing we can consider are glasses and contacts. We can factor those in, but the rest we can't consider. And this is just for purposes of determining if they have a disability. We're going to add these mitigating measures back in when we're trying to figure out what they need the school to provide. Okay, so the next stage of the evaluation process. So if a student doesn't have a disability, if they don't have a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits a major life activity, the answer to this question, this first question here, the gray question, is no. And we're going to say that they're not eligible and they're not going to get a 504 plan. We're going to let the parents know, written notice, and give them an opportunity, give them the procedural safeguards and let them know that they can challenge that decision if they want to. But if the answer is yes, then we're going to move on to the second question, which is, okay, we've got the student that's got this disability under 504. Now, what do we need the school to provide so they can equally access and benefit from their education? And to answer that question, we're just going to answer a couple questions. Well, first of all, how does the student's impairment actually impact them at school? And what accommodations or aids or services would be helpful in alleviating that impact? Students can be impacted in any number of ways: academically, socially, behaviorally, physically, emotionally, right? All of these different ways. So we want to make sure we're thinking about the whole school day. And the whole school day is the whole school day. It's not just in class, right? It's extracurriculars, it's eating, before and after school care, it's on the bus, um, all of these things. It's designed to level the playing field and bring the student up to kind of an equal spot, equal access in all aspects of their school day. Okay, this is where we're factoring mitigating measures back into the equation. So let's say that we do have a student that has a peanut allergy, pretty severe peanut allergy. Um, we can factor back in any medications they take at home that mitigates the impact of that. And if that means they need less from the school during the school day, okay, that's fine. We just want to make sure that we're documenting it. It's all about what the school is going to be providing. Accommodations that are already being provided are not generally considered to be mitigating measures. So we often hear, well, this is just something I provide for all students. And that's outstanding. And that is definitely the mark of a teacher that's really, considering and being inclusive. But if that teacher weren't there and that student were still to need those accommodations and they weren't being provided, would that student be not on an equal playing field? So any accommodations that we're already providing, so there was one student when I was teaching who had a muscular condition. I don't even know what it was, but she couldn't lift heavy things. And so she had a set of her textbooks at home and one at school, so she didn't have to lug them back and forth between school and home. That was not that was not a mitigating measure. That's an accommodation that should be in that student's plan so that that accommodation follows her as she progresses through her academic life. Okay, because from year to year, we might forget about that, or a teacher might not be willing to provide it, right? So other accommodations are providing extra time on a test, reserving particular seating for students. If we're doing this for kids, these need to be put into a plan if they have a disability. Okay, if they're effective, right? If they're not effective, then let's not put them in there. All right, what if the student has a disability, but they don't need the school to do anything because they're already handling it on their own? Then this student is going to be what we call technically eligible, meaning that they have a disability under 504, so they're protected from discrimination on the basis of that disability, but they don't actually need a 504 plan because there's nothing the school is going to provide. More commonly, though, we do have a student who has the disability and is going to be in need of those accommodations, and so that student is the student that we're writing the 504 plan for. Temporary impairments, recovering from surgery, broken bones, grieving, I don't know, mental or physical impairments, we're thinking broadly. Are they considered disabilities? And the answer is really that it depends. It's going to be an individualized analysis that the team talks through that takes into consideration like the expected duration of the impairment and the extent to which the student is limited. Okay, so they absolutely can be considered disabilities under 504 if they last, for a long period of time and if the student is substantially limited. So thinking about that. But there isn't a bright line rule, unfortunately. Any questions at this point? No? Okay. Just a reminder, we're documenting all of this. So key takeaways for the evaluation are just that before we evaluate someone for the first time, we're notifying parents and getting consent. All of the decisions that we make to answer those two questions are going to be team decisions based on a variety of sources of data. And we're looking at whether or not the student has a disability under 504, and if they do, what accommodations do they need the school to provide in order to help level that playing field. If you'd like to take a look at how kind of a best practice for documenting this stuff and going through the eval, we do have sample forms that you're welcome to take a look at. I'm guessing most of you probably are using like IEP Online or some similar type of system for your 504s, which is great because it allows you to do like uniform paperwork for everybody. But if you're curious, you're welcome to take a look at ours to see kind of making sure that we're asking the right questions and documenting the right things. Okay. Okay, so we're at a decision point here. I only have about 10 minutes left, I think. Oh, are we at 10 o'clock? Do I need to stop? I do. Do we want to talk
We
IHPs?
are at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
So I would love to hear more about the that question regarding just put the accommodations in an IHP for the student. Um, if you don't mind, I will ask our next presenter, Dr. Wallace, if you can have a few minutes of his of time to answer that question, because I know that
Yes.
um, there's has been nurses that have gotten that question. Um, just
Do you
one
want me to
second.
proceed or wait until you've confirmed with the next presenter?
Hey, Lene. Good morning, everybody.
Good
I'm
morning.
fine with a couple minutes. I don't have a full 30-minute presentation, so could do 5 minutes or
5 minutes?
so. I want to answer questions if people have them though, and need to leave at
Awesome.
10:30.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Wallace. We appreciate your flexibility.
Thank you very
So if you
much.
don't mind answering that for us, we'd really appreciate it. And then if you do have questions for Kasha, please put them in the chat so we can use the next few minutes to answer questions for you.
Yes. So individualized health plan. So I just have this scenario, which is Isaiah, fifth grader, epilepsy diagnosis over the summer, worked with the nurse to create an individualized health plan, and he started school with that plan in place. It includes accommodations and an emergency care plan. The question that we get asked, is this enough? Is this a 504 plan? And the answer is it depends. If the school followed the Section 504 procedures to arrive at that plan, then it doesn't matter what you call it, right? It can be a 504 plan, it can be an individualized health plan. The name doesn't matter. It's whether or not you followed those procedures. Parents have been given the notice of their rights, right? There's been team decisions. You've collected information from a variety of sources, okay? So if your district is doing that, then it's fine. Okay, the thing that we're encountering though is that people are saying for students with health conditions, all they need is this individualized health plan, and we're not going through the 504 process, and that is a problem potentially. Okay, that could be a problem and be a great basis for a complaint. So again, I offer our office to you as a source of support and troubleshooting if you know that this might apply to you or you're wondering, well, how am I going to work through this now giant stack of IHPs that I have that I now have to make sure I've gone through the 504 process. We have worked with districts through helping them triage and develop a plan for making sure that this is happening from this point forward. So please reach out to us. And that is all the time I will take on that out of respect for the next presenter who's been so kind. So
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. And my email address, you can email Linnea and do you feel comfy sharing that? I can put it in the chat. I'll just put it in the chat.
Go ahead and put it in the chat. I'm also going to be posting your slide deck to our nurse Google Drive so that the nurses will have access to it after this meeting. There were a
Perfect.
couple of more questions from Amber, but I will do a follow-up email for the meeting with so I will email you her questions or even just send out your answers so that way those that watch this later will get those answers for them. But thank you so
Perfect.
much for your time and we really appreciate you being with us. Thank you, Kasha.
Thank you, everybody.
And Dr. Wallace, thank you so much for your flexibility. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
we'll
Gosh, I
turn the
wish
time
I'd
over
been
to
on
you.
earlier and heard all of your presentation. I'm a doctor in Okanagan County, and I'm always working with patients and trying to figuring out do they need a IHP or 504 plan, and how can I advocate for that. So I almost wanted to let you keep going so I could learn, but I want to talk about our respiratory illnesses and about measles and make sure you guys are prepared because I'm trying to make sure all of our uh, health partners and systems are ready for measles if and when we see it. So I'll give you some resources and then maybe we can even follow up and see if you guys feel like the preparedness you have aligns with a lot of the recommendations that are coming out. I want to discuss a little more briefly respiratory illness season and give you an update. Fortunately, I'm sure you guys are seeing a lot of decreased activity as all our healthcare partners are. Then talk about measles preparedness. So Washington State really got hit hard in February. You guys experienced it, I know, and was really leading the country in influenza-like activity for a time. Fortunately, we are downtrending, but still have a little more activity than most of other states. You can see in the graph on the bottom that second peak that was much higher than the kind of turn of the year, early January peak. Unfortunately, for about 4 weeks now, we've been downtrending. That was the latest peak of that sort we've seen in about 3 years or over 3 years, and surprised us all, I would say. Our COVID-19 and RSV activity are below the seasonal threshold. This is regional data now, and influenza is still downtrending, and I expect by next week we'll be at or below the threshold, as is more typical for this time of year. We also hear from our local emergency rooms and hospitals, primary care clinics. All of their numbers are also declining. Our outbreaks in long-term care facilities have nearly all closed, and we get great information from absenteeism reporting from you guys, but also from healthcare partners, and those numbers are down. This year, we've had our regional epidemiologist, Elizabeth Austin, working to get county level data, and she's been successful in that. We've been following it. It's aligned well with our regional data, with the county level specificity that we expect to see. So these graphs on the right are Chelan-Douglas. I can tell you that Okanogan County saw a higher increase in that second peak than the other counties did, which is going to be helpful information moving forward, so we can provide more geographic specific information, advisories, recommendations. But all 4 counties in our region are now downtrending. And it really was influenza. That last graph on the bottom right shows that the influenza-like illness reports, which are in general all respiratory illnesses, very closely mirrored the influenza rates. And so influenza was really driving a lot of the illness that we were seeing over the past 6 weeks. We did do subtyping, and hospitals are still doing subtyping for individuals who are hospitalized, so have severe cases of influenza A. Looking for novel strains, we usually see H1 and H3 as seasonal influenza strains, but we're trying to pick up anything that is out of the ordinary, whether it be avian influenza or another sort of new influenza, but have not seen anything other than seasonal flu this year. Measles, I think I presented on maybe last summer because I had given a Board of Health presentation, and we kind of piggybacked measles discussions on our pertussis cases, because I think pertussis and measles oftentimes resemble one another and are on the rise because of lower vaccination rates. And kind of have the same pattern of vulnerability across our region and across the country. Measles is more contagious. It's more easily spread, more easily contracted, and it has more severe impacts. Before 1957, we considered nearly everyone having had exposure to measles at some point in their life. The vaccine was introduced in the 1960s, and then really made more available in the late 60s, early 70s. And since that time, in the United States, measles has nearly been eradicated. In 2000, it was actually declared eradicated in the United States. The incidence had dropped to less than 1 per 1 million annually. And we were not seeing many endemic cases. The cases we were seeing were single individuals coming from areas with greater measles prevalence who were unvaccinated. And now, over the past 20 years, we've seen measles start to rise as vaccination rates decline, and then travel increases and instability in other countries increases, such that political socioeconomic realities limit access to measles vaccination in other countries. So we see travelers coming from other countries, either from the United States to visit and then back, or immigrating to the United States from measles endemic countries and not having up-to-date immunity or vaccination status themselves, and then spreading it into communities and among individuals that are not vaccinated in the United States. So 2019 was a heavy year. We had folks from Clark County Public Health come to present to us last year, shared a lot of what they learned. And as you guys are aware, New Mexico and Texas are seeing a large outbreak as we speak. So to date, there have been over 300 cases. There were not a total of 300 cases in 2024. So in the first 3 months of the year, we've surpassed the number of measles cases in the United States that we had last year. Kids are mostly being affected, and 95% of folks in this outbreak are not vaccinated or have unknown vaccination status. There are vaccine non-responders. Typically, that rate is 97% success in the vaccine. So 3% of individuals that get the vaccine don't develop the antibody immunity. And that's trending pretty close to what they're seeing in Texas and New Mexico right now. 2 deaths have been reported, about 50 hospitalizations at this point in time. I'm doing a lot to try and prepare our clinicians and our frontline teams. I consider you a part of that, because oftentimes you guys see these illnesses even before the clinics see them. We're having a talk tomorrow, and I can get you guys the link if you'd like it. Lene or Kathy, I could send it to you and you can push it out. But Chaz DeBolt, one of the expert epidemiologists at the Department of Health, and I are going to talk about measles and clinical preparedness on a webinar at 12:30 tomorrow by Zoom. And so I'd love for you all to join us. And if I have a second right as I conclude, I can put the link into the chat and share a flyer with you guys. Measles has a distinct and very characteristic onset and kind of clinical profile. Not many of us have ever seen it. And so there's plenty of uncertainty around it, but typically in 7 to 21 days after someone is exposed to measles, they develop typical upper respiratory symptoms. There's a cough as well as runny nose, conjunctivitis, and the individual can develop white spots on the inside of a red erythematous oral mucosa called Koplik spots. And then the fever develops. So fever begins during that early prodrome period. It can be a high fever up to 104. And then the rash develops. So fever and then rash. Oftentimes you see rash and then a fever with a lot of illnesses. That's not what measles does. So measles starts with the prodrome, starts then with a fever, and then the rash comes on typically about 4 days after that start of symptoms. The rash starts kind of on the hairline at the forehead. It's maculopapular, meaning it's red. It's a little bit raised, but has flat components to it. It's confluent, meaning the bumps or the red spots merge with one another, and it continues down the head, face, into the entire body. You don't typically see measles rash just on an arm or just on the leg, or starting on the arms and legs and moving up. Starts at the head, moves down, and includes the entire body. The period of infectiousness is important to understand. And so an individual can be infectious and able to transmit the measles virus to other people 4 days before the onset of rash. That's right around the time that the prodrome starts. until 4 days after the onset of rash. And so that helps us to define our isolation period, where people with symptoms should not be at school, should not be out in public, and should try and avoid contact with anyone else that's not immune. Labs can conduct swabs on from the nasopharynx as well as the urine in certain time periods of time, and public health lab as well as a lot of the commercial labs can process that. Public health facilitates rapid diagnosis for measles. So DOH team joins forces with us at our local health jurisdictions to expedite shipment and assist in diagnosis for our healthcare providers. We try to avoid certainly the most severe complications, pneumonia, encephalitis, and death, and recognize that it's going to impact the youngest children and then adults more. So our elementary age, middle school, high school age kids fortunately aren't going to see as high of a complication rate as adults and the youngest kids. As I said before, the MMR vaccine, both doses confers 97% immunity. So typically those doses are given at 12 months of age and then after 4 years of age. And then individuals who are more likely to have exposure during outbreaks or with travel may be recommended to receive an early dose for the youngest kids, or a second dose if immunity is not certain. For those folks that are not immune, don't have 2 doses, or don't have an IgG level that represents immunity, they can receive another dose of vaccine or their first dose of vaccine within 24 hours of exposure. And that helps lessen the severity of the illness and may prevent onset of illness itself. Measles is spread by airborne droplets, so we use airborne precautions. We isolate individuals with symptoms immediately and until 4 days after rash, and it's an immediately notifiable public health condition. Your infectious disease control guide is fantastic. It has really good information. So I'm sure you know all several hundred pages of that backwards and forwards. But if it needs to be dusted off, please do so. It's got a great couple of pages on measles. Highlights to point out from that. 1, continue your routine illness screening. So individuals with upper respiratory like symptoms should be excluded and wait 24 hours for symptoms to resolve. If things seem to be getting worse, then see a healthcare provider. And then if somebody comes into your room or presents to school with a fever, cough, runny nose, conjunctivitis, certainly if they have a rash, they really ought to be evaluated by a healthcare provider. And for those kids, I would go ahead and isolate them in your nurse room or the area in your facility that you have designated as an isolation room until they can get picked up or transported to medical care. And then please, it's not a requirement, but it's a plead to notify the healthcare provider that a student with these symptoms is coming, so that they can put into place a rapid rooming procedure and get the individual out of the waiting room and back to the back where they can be isolated as quickly as possible. The vaccine requirements are set in there for kids entering kindergarten. So kids should have already received 2 doses by kindergarten of the MMR vaccine. And so if you guys can maintain your list of kids with exemptions or that have not demonstrated compliance with the requirements, that really helps when we get into outbreak status and know who needs to be excluded from school, because unfortunately measles is an illness where we exclude kids from school. So isolation and quarantine. Isolation is the exclusion or protection of an individual with symptoms from the general public. And then quarantine is protection of an individual from others when they've not yet developed symptoms, but when they have been exposed and we have concern that they will become ill and be able to expose other people. So isolation is for those kids that show up with symptoms, or those kids that have been diagnosed with measles and need to isolate for 4 days after the rash develops. So kids diagnosed with measles, they've got a rash. From the day of rash onset through 4 days, they should stay at home and not come to school, and they can return on the 5th day and be considered non-infectious. Kids, however, that do not have proof of immunity, either through vaccine or staff members who might have had measles or born before 1957, those individuals who do not have immunity need to quarantine for 21 days if your school has an outbreak of measles. Or if they have known exposure to measles. They can develop measles within that 21 days. And so we need to wait that duration of time before they do or do not develop symptoms. So routine precautions for communicable disease control include for measles and other respiratory illnesses, airborne precautions, disinfecting areas where the individual was, areas of exposure. The Infectious Disease Control Guide has good links to disinfection protocols. As with all illnesses, promote hand and respiratory hygiene among kids and staff and throughout the school. And then referral for healthcare, communication with your healthcare partners to try and promote or get folks up to date on immunizations. And then, as I said, within those 72 hours after a non-immune individual is exposed, they're a candidate for MMR for post-exposure prophylaxis. And then finally, be sure to report even suspected measles. It doesn't have to be diagnosed, but if you have a rash and a fever and a rash, and suspect measles or expect a contagious disease, give us a call. Let us know at Okanogan County, Chelan, Douglas, Grant health districts, and we can help you with what to do next and how to take care of the kiddo that's there with you. But let us know immediately. Don't wait. Don't delay. I think that's it. Yeah. So resources I have here. Sorry, one more slide. Are the ones I'm sharing with clinicians. And I think it would be helpful, especially to look at the CDC Measles Health Alert for March 10th that just came out. Review that, compare that with your infectious disease control guide. It might be a little more clinically oriented, but where questions arise, I'd love to work through those with you guys. Hear the questions you have, because those are questions other people are going to have. And so an answer I can come up for you guys is going to be an answer that I know I will have again, or have the opportunity to provide again to others. So your questions will help me. You'll help our public health system get stronger, and hopefully help us with better advice and recommendations to others. So happy to take questions and really appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys today.
All right, there were a couple of questions in the chat. One
Great.
of them, Amber from Grant County Health District, answered, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity to hear about it or comment on
Yeah, I
it.
would love it.
From Bree, she said, is there a recommendation for early immunization for at-risk populations such as infants less than 1? And Amber, thank you, Amber, for responding. She said that infants can receive their first dose at 6 months only if they are traveling internationally. And then there's also a plan for travel regarding measles from the CDC that Amber put in our chat for us. So thank you again, Amber.
Amber, thank you so much. Yeah, and in that health alert, CDC and Texas Department of Social Health Services has recommended that those counties that are impacted with the current measles outbreak go ahead and give that early MMR to kids between 6 months and 11 months of age. But that's just for individuals that live in those counties, as an addition to the international travel recommendations. If Okanagan County or Grant County were to find themselves in the middle of a measles outbreak, then we would likely make the same decision, but have not done so yet. And I appreciate the interest.
All right, our next question is from Ben. Can you explain how MMR vaccination would help with post-exposure prophylaxis?
Yeah, great. So a lot of vaccines actually accelerate the process that the immune system develops to fight an illness, to fight a vaccine. So there are some illnesses where vaccination actually helps the body ramp up faster than it naturally would, to prevent and protect the body from a virus. And so let's see, we do that with rabies. We do it with some other illnesses. And so measles is one of those. We want to help the body boost its immunity as quickly as possible, and can do that during the latency phase.
I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anyone else have a question they'd like to unmute and ask Dr. Wallace?
I just have a quick clarification, Dr. Wallace, for the differential. If we're seeing symptoms, it seems like conjunctivitis is what stands out prior to the rash. So without conjunctivitis, we should not be as concerned, or not referring specifically for measles.
Specifically for measles, I would, if a kid has cough, coryza, which is a runny, stuffy nose, and a fever and a rash, I would consider measles, even if they lack the conjunctivitis.
Okay, thanks.
Great question to ask local healthcare partner, whoever your go-to person is, and make your LHJ one of those go-to people. Say, hey, I've got somebody that's had upper respiratory symptoms for 3 or 4 days. They spiked a 104 fever. They don't have conjunctivitis, but they've got this rash on their forehead. What should I do? And I think my response would be to relieve you of your care of that individual, have them in the hands of a healthcare partner, and then work through the diagnostic process.
Did I also understand, Dr. Wallace, that knowing sort of the order of things, that the fever came before the rash, or the other way around, would be an important
Yeah,
differentiating
knowing
factor?
that the fever came before the rash would kind of raise your suspicion. If the rash came before the fever, then suspicion is lower.
All right. Well, if there are any other questions for Dr. Wallace, please go ahead and ask now. Otherwise, we'll say thank you so much for your time and being with us and answering our questions. And we really appreciate you being with us each month. So thank you, Dr. Wallace.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry I missed it last month. And Lene, I'll send you my slides, and I'll also send you the flyer that has the Zoom link to the talk tomorrow.
Perfect. Perfect. And I also wanted to do a shout out to Amber at Grant County Health District for answering questions in the chat. So thank you for joining us too. We really appreciate you being with us. And she did just put something else in the chat regarding travel and vaccinations. Yep. Thank you, Amber. And so without further ado, we'll turn the time over to Kathy for our school nurse updates. Excuse me. Thank you.
All right. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? All right, very good. First, I have to apologize. This camera where I'm sitting is at an odd angle, and I feel like I'm looking off into the sunset here, but I'm really looking straight at you on my screen. So sorry if it looks like I'm not watching you, but I'm actually looking at you. So just good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to see all of you this morning, and I hope that you found the content today to be helpful. I'm going to go through some updates with you this morning, just to share some information and some resources with you, just to make sure that you're aware of some of these things that are coming up. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Okay, and how's it looking? Can you,
sorry, I forgot you can't see us. It looks great,
Yeah.
Kathy. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. First of all, I want to wish everybody a happy spring. I'm so glad. I hope it's sunny where you are. The snow is starting to melt. Glad we don't have to go over the passes because they're still snowy today, but otherwise, I just want to wish everybody a very happy spring, and glad that the warm weather's coming back and some sunshine is coming our way. Okay, let's go through some North Central ESD updates. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the district assessment. So thank you for all of your work getting your district assessments in. I know some people are working busily on these documents, and we sure appreciate your time so much getting this data to us. A couple of questions have come up, largely, I think, because there were some revisions made to the district assessment this year. And so perhaps those might be unfamiliar to folks. But the first one I just wanted to point out is on the first page of the district assessment, where it talks about special assignment hours and administrative hours for the RN. And so special assignment hours, these could be hours that are at your district. They might be hours that you provide to a student, such as perhaps a one-to-one student care that you're providing, a 2-to-1 student care that you're providing. That would be an example for you. Other examples of special assignments would be migrant school nurse case managers. That would be an example of a special assignment of RN hours in a school district. So we're trying to capture all of these different hours that are being provided within your district that aren't necessarily the direct service hours that are being provided in health services. The other hours we're trying to capture are administrative hours, and these are really looking at time that you might be spending to specifically assigned to work on policies and procedures. For example, when you're not available to respond immediately to student needs. It could also be if you're involved on a team and you're involved in helping doing some sort of evaluations, or if you're involved in evaluations of different programs. Those might also fall under administrative hours. And we're going to talk about a little problem we had with the formatting in a minute, but I just wanted to clarify what the meaning of those is. And do make sure, if you're not sure, that you have just a few minutes to review the instructions, and it'll go over those differences. Another question that has come up is related to the 504 plans. And what we're trying to identify here is whether or not students have, we're just trying to see all the different plans that students have that are related, really specific to health. And so they might have a health plan, they might have an IHP, they might have an ECP. Those two documents are captured under their number of care plans. And then the far column over on the right-hand screen is asking for the number of 504s. So this may not be every single 504 that have been created in your district, but we are looking for those ones that are really specific to a health issue, and particularly that you have been involved in. However, this was a change this year, and some people are reporting that it's very difficult for them to collect that information. And I just want to make sure that people are aware, if you cannot find that information, or if you're just not really sure how you would go about collecting 504 information, it's really okay to leave it blank this year. We'll be looking at that again for the coming year and deciding how best to capture that information for students. Okay, And then this was just a little calculation error that has occurred in the district assessment. And this has to do with your section 4, where we're looking at the RN staffing needs for your district. One of the things that this area does is it calculates based on data that you've already entered into the district assessment. And one of the things that it does, or was to do, was to make sure that when it calculates your actual RN hours that are being provided to the district that are specific to students, that it subtracts the hours that are assigned as either administrative hours or special assignment hours. Unfortunately, we found that there was an error in the calculation. And so we are correcting that as these come in. So if you happen to enter any administrative hours on your district assessment and you try to do your calculations and you can't figure out why your calculations look like they are incorrect, it is because the formula in that particular little H where it says minus special assignment and administrative hours, it should calculate, and it is not calculating correctly. And so we will fix that when it arrives here, and we will make sure to get a corrected copy sent back to you. Okay, and then the last section, just as a reminder, these have to do with contributions and health services gaps. We do get questions about these, and just as a reminder, these aren't grades. They are really just looking at what you have been able to provide so far this school year. If you have not been able to provide some of these tasks, it's okay to just indicate you haven't either been able to provide the service or you haven't been able to complete a task, and then how important is that task for you to complete it? Is it high on your priority list, or is it high on your resource needs list? Is it medium or low? Low things are things that just might not be able to make it to the top of the priority list, and high things are things that you might either need more resources for, or just you need to want to focus on more to complete this school year. Okay, just another quick update. You know, it's time, we're already moving into spring, so it's time to start thinking about your, spring work, over the next few months as you get ready for the next school year. And I know the school nursing role often feels like it's rolling from year to year to year, and you start thinking about what needs to be done for the coming year already. And so just as a quick reminder, we do have a calendar available for you on the Google Drive, and the link is here on the slide. And this is some reminders of each month of the school year and things that you might consider completing at this time of year. So this particular one, I believe, is March that I pulled up. And so there's some ideas here on things that you might be wanting to focus on. And then it continues on with April, May, and June to finish out the school year. Next thing is that there's going to be some turnover this year in the Washington State School Nurse Corps. And so we've got, currently, we're going to have 3 folks who are going to be retiring their positions. One of them is mine. The link here is the position is posted, so you will see it out on the North Central ESD website. If you are interested in taking a look at that, the job description is posted there, and the title is Nursing Corps and Health Services Director. So you are welcome to take a look, ask questions if you have any about that position. The other 2 positions that are also going to be open, one is ESD 105 in Yakima. The Mary Lou Sheehan is in that position. She also will be retiring, and her retirement date, I believe, will be in August or early September. So that position is open, and also the ESD in Anacortes, that's 189. If you are familiar with Lynette Ondeck, she will also be retiring at the end of this year. And so that position, though, has not been posted yet, but should be coming up here within a month or so. Okay, so let's look at some national, state, and regional updates. I do want to make sure that all of you have received your survey from Washington State Department of Health. Could you just kind of show hands, just kind of an informal poll here? If you did not receive it for some reason, please contact Catherine Graff, because we would like to make sure that everybody across our region has an opportunity to provide feedback about this. This survey went out on the 26th of February, and you should have received it, and administrators at your school district should have received it as well. So we're anxious to get that data collected and see what kind of impact it makes and how we might go about improving immunization compliance rates in Washington. Upcoming, we've got March 25th. Those of you who have been able to participate in the past in Catherine Graff updates, this is going to be the update for the 25-26 school year. So it's really important if you're new to school nursing this year, or you haven't had a chance to attend these before, it's really important to attend the Washington DOH update on immunizations in preparation for each coming school year. This one is going to be scheduled March 25th from 2 to 3. The link is here. And just as a quick reminder, this particular program is being offered not through Zoom, but it's being offered through a program called Train. So Train actually is a great kind of library of content. So once you have an account made on the Train website, you have access to a variety of learning opportunities. And it's also a way for them to provide this particular webinar to you. So you're going to want to, if you're going to attend this session, you're going to want to go in and make sure you have your Train account set up in advance so that you're not delayed trying to do this because it probably will impact your ability to attend. So you're going to want to get your Train account set up. Okay, some new resources. We just wanted to make sure you're aware of these. This one is from the Chelan Douglas Health District, and they have put together, the Chiskin team has put this together, and it's a 2-page document, and it is highlighting all of the disability-friendly summer camps in Washington State. So not only are these summer camps, many of them open to students without disabilities, but also for students who do have disabilities. These flyers are posted for you. You can find them in the Google folder under referral resources. So do take a look at those. They are available in both English and Spanish. And again, it is a couple of pages long and a great resource for you. The other thing from the news from the Chelan Douglas Health District, I just wanted to point out, they have been supporting a youth advisory board now for a while and have openings for this particular program. And so just to make sure you're aware, this is for youth between the ages of, between the grades of 9 through 12. And they represent Chelan and Douglas counties. And we just like to make sure that you're aware, and that if you have kids in high school who you think might benefit from developing leadership skills, being involved in kind of reviewing training materials, reviewing documents from the health district, this would be a great way to get them started. So they can apply for this position on the website, and the application deadline is the 1st of April. Okay, the next new update I wanted to point out to you, this is a multi-fold brochure that was created by one of our migrant nurse case managers, Blanca Salgado. And this is a resource document largely focusing on students who might be located in Eastmont, Wenatchee, Orondo, Kashmir, and Cascade school districts, because those are the school districts that Blanca largely serves in that region. This is a Spanish language document. If you would like to print this, make sure that you're printing it on 11 by 17 paper. It is a wonderful reference for you, and it's also available to you on the Google Drive under referral resources. A quick update on Medicaid in school nursing. I'm sure as you watch the news, you're hearing lots of information about Medicaid and possible cuts to Medicaid. So there's certainly a lot of interest right now. in looking and contacting people, in the legislature about our need for Medicaid funding, and the important role it plays for our students, because so many of our school students in Washington State are Medicaid covered. And this is just a quick reminder about NASA's new toolkit that they have put out. If you need talking points, if you're interested in printouts, like this example that I put on the page, those things are all available to you in this new Medicaid in School Nursing Toolkit, and you can access it there on the link. Yesterday, it was kind of interesting. Our team at the new Columbia River Information Service Center did a wonderful webinar on cumulative, specifically on the health module and how to document in the health module, from medication administration to care plan development to code updates. If you did not have a chance to participate in that program yesterday, they did record it. And here is some information about how you would get to some of your resources. If you are going to be in a school, and I know we do have some schools who are going to be transitioning over the summer from Skyward to Cumulative, this is a great place for you to start looking at the different resources that are available to you there. The web link is up at the top, and what you're looking for is the Greater Columbia River Information Service Center District Student Resources. You'll see a couple of links on the page, but this is the one that you're going to be looking at. When you click View Resources, you're going to be able to get to a lot of resources about cumulative. However, you might first of all get a little note popping up saying you need access to view these documents. So it's very easy to get it. All you need to do is send them your name, your district, your position, your email, and your phone number electronically, and they'll get it. And it seems like within 30 minutes, you have your account set up, and you are then able to go in and access these different tools and resources available in their Google folder. So just wanted to make sure you were aware of that, and it will also then, you'll be able to link to the video recording of yesterday's presentation. Oh, and this says cumulative resources too, but that is not true. This is really about Senate House Bill 1709, and that is one of the few bills that we have that it remains kind of active right now. We've had several things related to health that have really not advanced and are pretty much not moving forward. But this particular one has made it all the way into the Senate and is being looked at. This bill is addressing care of students with adrenal insufficiency. And what it's really looking at is the additional role of another PDA. Because the downfall of having injectable Solu-Cortef is that if you don't have a nurse in the building full time and the student requires that in an emergency situation, there isn't someone who is going to be able to administer it unless you have a trained person on site. So this bill is looking at the potential new role of a PDA who is specific to Solu-Cortef administration. So it actually continues to move forward, and we'll see, and we'll keep you updated on how this rolls out. Okay, so on the subject of measles, here's another opportunity. If you will get that link from Dr. Wallace to the one that's being he's working on for tomorrow. This is another one. This is being spearheaded by Snow and their professional development team, and it also is on measles. It's tomorrow, 3 to 4 p.m. Probably similar in content, but and just another opportunity for you to hear more about what's happening with measles in our state.
Hey, Kathy,
Aha.
if you could go back to that slide. Today's the 18th.
Oh, today is the 18th. Well, it's today.
Is it today? Okay.
Yeah, it's today. Today, 3 to 4 o'clock. Thank you, Sheila.
Okay.
Okay, the spring virtual conference is also this week. So there's another thing from Thursday through Saturday. Remember, the spring conference is a virtual conference, and so you have the opportunity, if you can watch it and participate on it from Thursday through Saturday, it is available. If you cannot and you want to have access to the recordings, you could watch these at a later time. So this is a combination of live presentations and on-demand sessions, and you'll have access to the content through April 30th. If you're with School Nurse Corps and you are interested in this, then please contact Sheila.
I'll be registering first thing in the morning for anybody that comes in today or today. So
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Additional upcoming training, we just want to make sure you're marking your calendar and you know what's coming up. Some of these things we have talked about in the past, but just kind of continuing to roll out education throughout the year. Would encourage people to come to School Nurse Connects on 3/27. That again is going to be a great opportunity to have a connection with Department of Health and the updates that they're going to be providing. We're also encouraging people to come to the School Nurse Day workshop here in person on May 7th. And interesting, yesterday we talked about an open lab for those people who are on cumulative and they need to do some health code cleanups. This is an opportunity on the 29th to log in there. It says it's from 9 to 3, but it's really an open lab setup where you could log in with someone and ask questions about getting your codes cleaned up for this 2024-25 school year. So you know that you have the most current codes moving forward. All right, and with that, I'm going to close and see if anybody has any questions.
There aren't any questions in the chat, except
Oh,
Michelle asked.
except for Michelle Rogie.
I was just gonna say, except for Michelle asking about the
At least she
snow
didn't
measles.
say, Kathy, can't you read your own slide and know what today is? I should have remembered, since yesterday was St. Patrick's Day. You should have remembered 17th, and we've moved on now to the 18th. So, all right. Well, I don't have any more to cover this morning, Lena. So thank you all so much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your continued dedication to your school and your students.
Thank you, Kathy. Just a quick note for you, the School Nurse Day on May 7th. The theme is tech and tools and how we can use those to keep our students in class. I will be working this week to get it into PD Enroller, or working with Sheila this week to get it into PD Enroller for you. So please be watching for that. It should be coming out soon for you to register. So we'll just go ahead and close up our meeting here with this final screen regarding clock hours. So as always, if you are interested in claiming clock hours for these meetings, that does involve a process, including registering in PD Enroller, attending either live or watching the recordings. PD Enroller has a survey that you need to fill out before you can purchase the clock hours. If you watch them virtually, virtually. If you watch them after the meeting is over and watch the recording, we do need to keep track of your attendance, and that's why we ask for you to fill out the survey form. But as always, if you are have any questions regarding claiming clock hours for these sessions, we really appreciate it. We really appreciate, or if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I appreciate being able to help you out with that. Thank you so much again for coming today. I know it's sometimes really tough to carve out some time during your busy morning schedules with your students and your staff and all you do at the school. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for being with us. And if there's ever any content that you'd like to hear about, please send me an email. I'd really like to be able to make sure that we cover your needs with these Zoom updates. So thanks again and have a great day.